All right, so here we are at the top of the hour. I'm LeiLani Cauthen, your host and an EduJedi Grandmaster. I'm also CEO of the Learning Counsel, news media and research organization. And we have with us today Lisa Lund, who is from out there in Colorado awesomeness, and Leslie Standerfer from Arizona, so from Buckeye Union. Excited to have you guys. We're going to have a really active conversation. We also have with us Brady from Edison Learning and Wendy from Edison Learning. I'm going to get into like the slides to show you guys off yet. But what we're going to do today is do activity 2 of the EduJedi agenda of 22 events happening this summer all the way through October. And this is the section of the dictionary on the intro to the big things in the EdTech landscape. So we're going to be looking at it, commenting on it, offering mini stories, hopefully from you, Lisa and Leslie, about what's going on in the field, to allow us as EduJedi to sort of edit this through, add definitions if needed, and talk about what are all the really big things, because everything changed with the pandemic, right? All right. So getting into, who you guys are and what's happening, and then I want to have Wendy share. Edison Learning was kind enough to sponsor all of these events so the EduJedi could get this work done. So Lisa, first I'm going to introduce you. You're Director of Educational Technology and Library Services from Denver Public. And a lot of things under your wings, right?
Yep, a lot.
Yeah. Always been a big admirer of yours, since we started talking about AI. And then Dr. Leslie Standerfer, Assistant Superintendent of Academics at Buckeye Union, one of the friendliest districts in the country, I believe, right?
We try to be.
Yeah, and the cutest kids. Can we just say that? Because I've met a bunch of them. Yeah, so it's good to have you with us because we have, I think, both views. Lisa, a little bit more technical side, and Leslie more academician side. And then also Wendy's more academician, and Brady, you're more technical, right? So I think it'll be a robust conversation. So I want to start off with a little background from Wendy and Brady on what's happening on the commercial side, because that's going to set us up for the definitions and what's going on with services in particular, because I think we're going to need to get into that in this particular event. So I'm going to give the screen over to you, Wendy, to do a little intro. Is that okay?
Okay, that sounds great.
For a few minutes, and you too, Brady. So over to you guys, setting us up.
Okay. So I won't take much time. I believe Brady's going to screen share for just a minute. It's really exciting to be here, and thank you both for joining us and helping do this work. What I really appreciate that has happened over the last year and a half, one good thing that's come out of all of this is so many schools are looking to extend their offerings. And that has allowed us to really become true partners, which is how I view our role as partners for schools and school districts. And one of the other things, and LeiLani, you actually shared this statistic with me, I don't know, a year and a half ago, is that parents and students are really looking for commercial grade products at this point because of the experience with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And that being said, that's another thing that we really can bring to the table and help these teachers who are just exhausted because they've been pulling together Google Docs and any types of material that they can to help their students be successful. So to tell you a little bit about Edison Learning, we've been around for quite a while, a little over 20 years, and we have over 150 courses. Our goal is really to work with the district, to be your partners, to offer online learning courses. We have tutors. We have our own instructional team that Brady actually oversees. We have guidance counselors on staff. They work with the students for SEL and advisement. We also have lots of ways to help you figure out how to spend that CARES funding. We have folks that will work with you on that to figure out the alignment. Very quickly, I'll show you a couple of courses, and then we can talk through today some of the other ways that we can partner and help in the services area, really. So just a quick look at a couple of our courses to show you some things. Students, things that I think are valuable, students can hop into our courses and they can take a course as a whole, or a student can pull out, or rather a teacher can pull out just a learning object to support teaching, or assign a whole course. So of course this could be done in the blended model or a fully online model, and courses can be personalized to students' learning needs. In this particular slide, you can see where we made accommodations for students where they can have the content read aloud, for example. In the next content, and then I promise we'll get on to our work. The next content slide, you can see where we have note-taking strategies. They can actually take notes within the content that accumulate. So just one of the ways in which we meet some needs for learners that may have some special needs. And then one of the things that really attracts me most to our content, if you look at the last content slide, you'll see where we have the opportunity for students to take a response to intervention that you'll see. And on our last slide, Brady, if you'll advance it.
That is the last slide.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, maybe it was the one, two back. But students can actually go through, and there is a response to intervention where they can take some additional content depending on how they score on assessments. And that is content that is actually designed based on how they perform. And that is really a strength that I find in our content, so that students can get that personalized content that they need. So it's students who need a challenge, and we also have additional content for students that need some extra help. So that's a very quick overview of what we do and what we offer. And then hopefully we can interject today and talk about some ways that we offer some services and things that I've been seeing out in the field as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And then, yeah, we're hoping Brady will pipe up along the way on all this too. All right, so let me just take the screen back. Doug, you have to give me the screen. Thank you. Taking the screen, I have to show the screen and not the object. Okay, here we go. All right, so moving on to, sort of like what we're going to be talking about today, let me pull up sort of the overview. So the big things are in the dictionary, and they're framing basically all of the, the big dinosaurs that are on your landscape in a school. And those start with these 5 definitions. What is a self-contained system, a learning management system of content, a content agnostic system, meaning it's just a framework. So you're supposed to stick stuff in there yourself. Sometimes you can buy stuff that'll integrate into it. A learning management system, curriculum management, then your content management system, which, there's some argument about the difference between that and a curriculum management system, but content management is essentially widely available on the commercial side. And it can include things like your Microsoft Office, right? Shared folders, and then a content or curriculum management system, and then applications. This was the original edit by the EduJedi. Okay, so let me go show you that specifically so we can edit in the dictionary. My thought is that the EduJedi first put together what is an ecosystem, here, this first definition, and then what are systems. Then they said, here's the self-contained system with full definition and considerations about what it is. And then the content one, content management, and then content or curriculum system. And then Learning Counsel is advocating to put in a 5th definition here, which would move the 6th down, or which made applications one the 6th one. And that is a definition. Can you guys see this on my screen? Okay. That would put in a hybrid logistics interchange, which is something that has grown as a conceptual type of system during the pandemic, because what happened was schools realized that Doug wants me to zoom it in bigger so you guys can see it. Okay, so let me scroll this down and over. Oops. Okay, is this easier to see? Okay. Here's the way schools have been functioning, and then we can get on to other added definitions. They've had pacing guides. 85% of the schools, I would say, have pacing guides, which are really, you go to your standards for your state, and you glob them together into chunks, or maybe just one individually. And then you say in your guides, which are documents and spreadsheets by and large, maybe they're PDFs located on your district site, and you stick them there as little, sort of independent little things marching around on the district landscape. They're not in your LMS. Maybe they are, usually they're not. Okay. Then you have over here in the school level, you have your master scheduling, which is sometimes done with sticky notes all over giant whiteboards. Okay. And then you plot in your calendar dates for breaks and holidays. And then you also go over and try to figure out what teacher's teaching when in what room and where and how is this all working. Okay, so here's then the teacher's job. The teacher looks at the pacing guides over here in this disembodied format. Then they look over at their schedule. When am I in the building again? When am I in what classroom? What's happening? And then they have to do their lesson plan. Pacing guide over here, schedule over here, plot the lesson plan. So a lot of them nationally have been doing it in a weekly or bi-weekly way. Like they don't plot out the whole year, right? And so so now your operational continuity as a district is nothing like what Wendy was just talking about on the commercial grade side, where it's plotted out. The lessons are they're synchronized across a period of time, right? So what came about in the pandemic is that hybrid logistics needs to go nuclear in sophistication in terms of, wait, we got to have a day off and we just got shut down again. Wait, we have to have AB days, AB weeks, only half the kids can be in the building at one time, blah, blah, blah. We'll freak, this constant freak out of time. I mean, everyone's hair was standing on end all year. It's like, are we going to be there? Are we going to not be there? Am I home today? What is happening? Where am I? So the ability to have highly flexible algorithmic pacing plots, okay, that are digital, schedules that can be highly flexible, that then notify everybody, you're here, then where, right, doesn't exist in the market yet. We're running a project as EduJedi and the Learning Council now to develop that structure in demonstration phase only inside No Story. So we think that this definition is needed. What are the thoughts on this actually being added? Can you guys read it?
Yeah, and I 100% agree with everything that you just said around, AB schedules and, in and out of school and flexibility. And, I think that even as we look at this and pacing guides and schedules, like I think school has to start being not 7:30 to 3:30 or 8 to 4 or whatever time your classes are happening, but what does that look like for kids to take ownership of their learning? I think during the pandemic, we realized, and we are working towards this, we're talking about how we accelerate learning, how we don't go back to doing learning like we did for the past 100 years in school. Like we can't go back to sitting in rows, lecturing to our kids and handing out worksheets. Like it just can't happen anymore. And we know that our kids, especially secondary, got used to, wow, I really need to support my parents because either my parents are sick or there's right now in the world, there's not enough jobs to go around. And so how can kids continue to learn and maybe not be in my classroom every day? How do we continue to support those kids and their learning? And so how do we figure out how that goes in there too, LeiLani? Like in my head, I think about that like, how do we have that additional piece for kids to know, okay, I can't work. I have to work 3 days this week, but I still want to learn. So how do I make sure I'm staying on track? How do kids take ownership of their learning in that part? It's just a thought, just a wondering that I have as I read that definition.
LeiLani, I don't know if I'm allowed to jump in there and say this, but Lisa, I just have to say, based on your comment, as I was reading this, LeiLani, I was thinking, and listen, Edison Learning doesn't do student information systems, but I was thinking of, my former roles and being on the other side of the fence. I don't know of a SIS out there that could manage all this, but it absolutely has to be done. And I think of your comment around student agency, and that's, growing that in students is what makes them be successful. And I think it goes back to this needs to be in the dictionary, because providers have to be able to do this as your partner. And I'm saying that not as a SIS company, right? But as a former educator, you need true partners with the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that the high space and time flexibility starts back, Lisa, at the student level. I'm sure, Leslie, you would agree. The student is demanding that, right?
Yeah.
And parents.
And I think two of the biggest barriers to, like last year when schools were shut down and we were trying to bring kids back and stuff, one of the biggest barriers was, what does the legislature and funding allow in public schools? Because if they, whether it works for us to provide education in a format or not, if, we can't get funded for that student, that's a whole issue. But the other thing is, I know a lot of the time we spent last year was trying to do this kind of thing, because as was said, there is not a student management system out there. They're set to take attendance of the kids sitting in the room, or they're set to record minutes of an online. They are not set right now to handle hybrid. And that was some of the biggest challenge, is the number of hours we spent figuring out how we were going to manage that within, okay, and our data can upload to the state and we can get funded for kids based on doing the creativity. It wasn't necessarily coming up with the ideas of how to serve kids that meet their needs. It was, how do we make the system let us serve kids that way?
Yeah, and is some of that seat time for you guys in Arizona? Physical seat time?
Well, Arizona has different rules they allow us to have the Arizona online, where we can have students. So we have in our district, we have our LC online program. And then you can count kids present if they're physically in the classroom. And they do fund those two different ways. So a kid has to either be I come in person, or they have to be an AOI. And last year they allowed, because of the pandemic and things, they allowed us, like if you did classes through Teams or Google, or you had some pieces where kids were in class part of the time and doing online part of the time, they allowed you to do some conversions and act like they were in the classroom, even though you were doing these other, creative models. And there is definitely, at least in Arizona, a push of get them back in person every day the way they used to come. So that flexibility we had last year, from the legal side and funding side, has been closed. And so right now it's like, okay, they're either an online student or they're an in-person student. And how do we get to do this hybrid that really meets the needs of kids and allows learning to be personalized for kids?
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you, and then I want to ask Lisa's opinion on this too, and Wendy, you can weigh in from your earlier posts, and Brady, you maybe too, is that what I'm hearing is that maybe in this next reference guide, we need to also have maybe a one-pager that is recommended legislation or legislative or rule language at the state level, because the pandemic shifted consumer, parent, and student expectations. Mm-hmm. And going back to normal is not going to work anymore.
Correct. But you
so that blended, the either or model isn't going to work, because there are a lot of parents that still want the social side of art classes, hands-on labs, sports teams, but everything else, they're like, no, I want complete flexibility. I only want my kid to come in when I have to come into the city to do my yoga class. Other than that, I mean, it's ridiculously true, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we can do very limited flexibility under concurrent, that they can be a half day online kid and a half day in person. But yeah, our legislature and rule makers need to know what education can look like if we would allow it.
Yeah. Lisa, what are your thoughts on that? How is your state situated?
And I think this year there's still a little flexibility. We're still trying to figure that out. As we all know, sometimes governing boards are not as clear about where they're heading either. But I do think it's an issue. I would agree. But I also think that as a district, how do we figure out how to make that work? I know that lying kind of sounds bad, but how do we make that work within our system of, like, we know the kid can't be there, but yet they're still learning. Like, how do we account for that without, like she said, like, our learning, our SIS is very unfriendly, as most of them are, and it doesn't matter. The grass always looks greener on the other side with an SIS, but really they're not that much different when you get in. And I've been on, I think, 4 at this point. And so, and it's about how you adopt it and work with it. And I met with the learning management system and they also have an SIS, but we're not grading correctly in there either. Like, what do you mean? We want to do standards-based grading. We want all these things to work for our kids. We want to be on different point value systems. And I looked at our LMS and said, you guys need to think about grading for equity. Like, you're so far behind. Like, you need to catch up to where the world is now, because you guys are like 10 iterations behind for us. So let's meet and talk about what grading for equity looks like. How can we make you guys think about that and move forward with that as well? So I think those are all things that kind of tie into this.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, pandemic happened and then everything shifted and they're like behind already, of course, right? Of course. Okay, so Wendy and then Brady, from your point of view, what are your thoughts on this particular area?
Well, I'm cheering, right? So innovation is so critical. And I have such a concern for my friends that are in classrooms and that are leaders in districts, because they're getting so much pressure from parents. And then the opposite is happening from the state, and they're even in locally controlled states, right? Because they're getting pressure from the state where the funding comes from, even if they're locally controlled, to push back. And so it's a tug of war. You've got parents that are saying, well, now we have a voice and we know that we do, and we have choice, and this is what we want. But then the state, who holds the purse strings, is saying, no, get those kids back in the classroom. We want this traditional model. And, that change will happen. But I think that there has to be a reliance from the districts on some partners to help make that happen. Because it's so much happening so quickly. Unfortunately, just like you said, Lisa, there's not a SIS out there that will do what's in this description and that will do everything. No matter, first of all, I can't believe you've been on 4. I'm bowing down to you because you survived those transitions.
Yeah, Lisa, you're still alive. What?
Yeah. But there's not one out there that will do everything. And it's like you said, they need to get with the program, right? Because change is so slow in education, and all of a sudden, boom, right? It was demanded. And, I'm excited to see what this will do for education, but unfortunately, we're going to have to survive the change process.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Brady, what's your comment on this same conversation?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Wendy more. As we move forward, there's a lot of change that's happening that's relatively quick, and we need to either catch up with it and be ahead of the game. That way we can plan that future and where that goes, and make sure that vision where there is choice, there is flexibility, that's built in as we move forward with those systems. As a parent too, I'm seeing my kids who are in elementary school, and just those messages that I got all last year. I got like 4 or 5 messages from the school about different things that were happening. These people, this school was closed, but this school was still good to go. These grades, we're going to be at home for, 3 or 4 days, and like all this confusion of what was going on. And just, I feel sorry for the person that was sending all those emails out. And if we can get something that is a system that can automate that way there is a seamless process, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
My point of view.
If there's an opportunity
Okay.
to work with a partner to think outside of the box, I know we've worked with a lot of districts and schools to look at those rules and see how can we help you think outside of the box. So, we have we have an app that does geotagging for attendance, and that works with our course management system. And that has helped some districts get around some of the funding issues, but it's different with every state. So, it's just a process working with and I say a partner and not a vendor, but somebody that you trust to try to figure out what you can do to try to help with that tug of war that's going on.
Okay. All right. So I have an ask for all of you then. I need a couple bullet points top of mind of what's going to be needed for us to write up and vet as an independent, like I said, needed legislation or needed policy change. What are the unforgivables, so to speak? Like, why are you making us do this on the seat time stuff, right? Like, or whatever those things are. Because the high flexibility and, flip on a dime to go to this model or do that way or or have a summer camp. And, I think that's where we're at since the pandemic. I mean, for all we know, there's mad scientists inventing new things all over the world somewhere in some cave. And it could happen again, right? So we need to be prepared for that. Okay, so let's put that one aside for now. Then I think the other area we need to talk about is this services thing, because right now in our big national survey, which we're doing 2 this year, one is to the teacher level, one is to the administration level. Lisa, I think you guys responded, and I think Buckeye did already too. But if you didn't, I'll hound you for the EduJedi awards and stuff like that. But we're seeing this big giant list of disaggregated services starting to uptick. So like school districts that do the academic testing for homeschoolers, you can still do your testing with the district, right? You could still join the football team. You're only required maybe to do one science lab where you're supposed to have hands-on that the homeschool environment isn't going to offer, but you have to do that. So you can be a homeschooler in this district. So this disaggregated map of services, including a lot like what Wendy and Brady deliver, we're going to pick up your extracurricular full model online. And we're going to use your teachers, or you can use some of our teachers. So you see what I'm saying? It's like this Toad's Wild Ride thing of who's doing what. People's minds were blown during the pandemic, and they said, why am I doing this all myself? I can't get somebody else to do maybe just the content, or can't somebody else do these kinds of courses because I can't find a science teacher to save my life out here, that kind of stuff. So I think we need to define services and what the parameters are, because they're so loose now. Leslie, I want you to go first. What are your thoughts on this? I think you're on mute. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
I think some of the challenges is just that whole changing the thinking from learning has to take place in a classroom to what is real learning, and how do we account for it without, right now we say put kids in a classroom and, they must be learning because they're present, and then the teacher does some little assignments and puts them in the grade book, and that's how we know the kid learned. And I think there's a whole bunch of experiences out there that we're not giving anyone credit for, that kids are learning, that kids are doing these great things. And so I think we need to define, my thought is there needs to be a real shift in how we define what learning in school is, so that we can actually, one, provide those services and give kids credit for them, and have the funding and resources to count that and be able to do that for kids.
I totally agree. And in my mind, what I'm now seeing is schools competing in their local area to gain back partial students, the whole student, or whatever, because they offer more than they were able to physically in buildings and physically with the humans they already have, because they've matrixed in other things that are services. So some kid is like, he finishes physics and calculus by the time he's done with 7th grade. What do you do with that kid? Put him in college? He's too young, right? What do you do? Like, no. Yeah. Okay, Lisa, what are your thoughts?
I agree with all of that. I think too, like, how do kids like build portfolios online to show that I'm continuing that learning? I think we were laughing the other day about something, I don't know, like we think kids are so far behind during the pandemic. And yes, I am sure that they are behind, but we also don't give our kids credit for things that they probably learned that are real world. Maybe they had to cook while they were home. I bet they did some math, and we're not like taking into those real world experiences. And how can we account for kids like, did I really need to learn standard 1.2.6.3 to be a successful human in life? I'm not so sure that is always true anymore. And so, yes, I need to know how to add. I need to know how to subtract. Don't get me wrong. I need to know how to read. I do need fundamental skills. But then where do I take that fundamental skill? And how college is expensive. Is that where everybody needs to go right now? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I can go to a trade school and probably make more money than I did when I got out of college, being an HVAC person or something like that. So I just think we have to take into account all our kids' different, where they're going, their trajectory, and then what are those skills I need to be successful. But also, like you said, I could be creating something that you don't even know about on my computer that I now have access to 24/7. And maybe I've created a whole new video game and I don't need to go to college. I probably sold that to Xbox and I'm making more money than Lisa is as director of technology. So I just think we have to think about all kids' experiences and how we look at that.
Yeah, you're talking about, remember when it was like teach to the whole child? Now it's like teach to the whole life. Like what's the whole life view? Balancing checkbooks, cooking, picking up after your dog when you take him for a walk. What's the, there's like a whole life view. Well, what I'm going to ask then is, Wendy and Brady, if you can give me a little overview of services adjunct lines in that are coming in from the outside now. Let's sketch that definition out.
Yeah, so Brady is going to share with you a little bit about what our instructional team does, but I don't know if you're planning on sharing this, Brady, but while you pull that up, it's interesting, LeiLani, that you said teach the whole child, because we also offer some classes that really work with SEL, and our advisors or guidance counselors do that as well. And a lot of people don't think about that with online learning and how you reach out to the whole child. We even bring in Connect a Career with our CTE courses, and we have speakers weekly from different career areas that speak to students, just to try to get them to understand different career opportunities and what's out there and what it takes.
Well, that's really like what Lisa was talking about. I think that's a missing piece.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of school, I mean, Lisa, you got a big district, and Leslie, yours is pretty big, and I understand is the fastest growing city in America. So you're not totally resource poor like a lot of the smaller districts where they literally don't have counselors.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I've really tried to bring to Edison Learning is we're not just going to give you courses and walk away, online courses, right? We can either offer you content with our additional resources like what I described, or we can offer content with teachers. So, a lot of districts have trouble staffing with certain areas or with teachers. And so, we provide both options, but I'll let Brady speak to that.
Yeah, let's go through that quickly so that I can make notes on what this definition of needs to be. And then I'm coming back to you, Lisa, and also Leslie.
For us, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do and reach out to a school district. For example, we have a school district in Michigan that we've partnered with and had 6,000 enrollments over the past school year. And, you know, we're providing teaching services to them. You know, I don't know if it's because there's a teacher shortage at that school district in that area, if it's something they want to dabble into, having the remote opportunities, right? Having kids being able to access courses online from home. If it is something like having those CTE courses where they may not have the funds to hire a career instructor for that course, if it's construction, if it's a cooking course, a tech course. That way the students have access to those types of courses and can kind of gauge their interest in those fields before they get out of high school. That's the biggest thing, is a lot of kids don't really know what's out there, what's available, and what they can do besides of go to college after high school or go get a job. So those type of CTE courses and elective courses that can be offered enable those kids to kind of get a taste or get some interest into a subject that they may not have accessed before.
So question, Brady, then, let's say
Yeah.
I'm Lisa or Leslie or anybody else listening in right now from the education side. Am I white labeling these for me as my district, my school?
You can, absolutely, you can.
Okay.
And I mean, how cool would it be as a district to say, you know, we're offering a course where students can get certified to fly drones. Right. People don't expect that out of a school district, right? And even the teacher, you know, the teacher can be white labeled, so to speak, as representing your district. And a lot of times people want us to do that. I probably shouldn't say this because it's being recorded. But when there are end of course tests involved, right? Sometimes teachers don't want that, or the district doesn't want that, right? Sometimes that lands on us. And so, you know, that's why I said it's important to have a trusted partner. Those are things to think about.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, before we go any further, that's a great point. But also I need the drone class because somebody in my neighborhood is doing fireworks every night at 10 o'clock. I'm tired of it.
Best
I need to find out who
neighbor-
it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so I mean that's what's interesting about what we do is we you know have so many different types of courses, and we have teachers all over the country. So, and so many different unique situations.
Yeah, and
Okay,
just
cool.
think about what Leslie was talking about. You know, what does it mean to learn in school anymore? We do have partners that, you know, are offering all these courses to bring students back into their school district from charter schools and those things. That way they have a cyber program. The students can still be a part of the school, do those athletic activities and other extracurricular activities.
Yeah, I find that's very interesting because, you know, it's so we really need to define this well. And I'm going to come back to you, Wendy and Brady, to give me the core, the definition, because I wrote a bunch of bullet points here. But, you know, corporate America many years ago started their matrix view. I remember when Nokia first came into the United States, their officer that they hired in the United States was like, we shall have no offices. Everyone will be at home. This is like 15 years ago. And we're going to outsource every service we possibly can. Right. So they were a company that wasn't a company. Right. They were a matrix, which is a very interesting view. We don't really have that view very deep yet in education, but it started big time in the pandemic because people realized, you know, they can't do this all alone in many places. So let's talk about services a little deeper. Lisa, you first, and then Leslie. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah. So I think because we're a larger district, we can provide more of those services, like you said earlier. Like we do have more options for college and career or CTE courses or things like that. So for us, that's a little bit different, but it does vary by school. And I think there's a way that, like, if I go to A high school and only B high school is offering HVAC, then I should be able to cross-pollinate my students and attend virtually or something like that. But that's something I don't feel is as, I guess, is as hampering for us because we are larger and have more of that ability to offer some more of that.
Yeah, matrix in a little bit more, maybe in an epic move to try to gather back in attrition.
Yes.
Kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Leslie, what are your thoughts on this services, the matrix view?
As I think about it, I mean, we have an online program, obviously, in our district, and we have a software that we use that gives us a whole host of other electives. We have really strong CTE programs. We're only a district of 5,000, but we're a high school only district. So that's 5,000 high school kids. So we are able to offer the CTE offerings and the career in college and those kinds of things. I think the struggle right now is that people want the flexibility, but they also want the touch of knowing that their kid is being taught by a teacher that their school vetted and that kind of thing. So the online software that we use, if we can either have our teachers facilitate it or they have teachers from all over the country that can facilitate it, so you can have an expert in that area. But our parents want to know that the teacher that their kid is contacting and dealing with is a teacher who's ingrained in our local culture and our district, and that we kind of have some control over the messaging of that teacher and that kind of thing. And so I think really one of the interesting things that I'm seeing is that parents and teachers and all of us, but are having to figure out what they really want, because they want all this flexibility and these new out-of-the-box experiences, but they still want the hometown. I know my kid's teacher and everyone interacting with my kid is trusted, and I know that, all the learning materials they're being exposed to have been vetted as appropriate for their age group, and so they want them still in a bubble, but they want a flexible bubble, and I don't know how we meet all of those goals. And that's, I think, the struggle that we have is we can offer you all this stuff, but now we're going to vendors or partners and they're not us, so that we don't have the same control over those vendors and partners. And we have that with our joint technological district and some options that we're looking at beyond dual enrollment in our campus, letting them go out for some enrollments and things like that. So
maybe services needs to have in the definition two different arenas, which is branded versus the unbranded, right? Because I know in California you can attach in an online that is literally state-led, so it's not branded for your district. It's an add-on that's not you, it's someone else, but it's not necessarily outside of government. It may be a private sector, enterprise, commercial thing like Edison Learning is, but it's not you, versus the branded. Right. You're the brand, you're coalescing all the pieces. I think that's probably the most comfortable position for most districts and schools, particularly when you get to the younger kids. You don't want like some weirdo 3 states away, like, what are you doing with the kindergartners? Anyway,
that's what I was.
Okay, good. So
that's what I was wondering, Leslie, is how would your parents respond? Because that's a hard place to be in as far as a balancing act. That it's kind of like wanting your cake and eating it too. And I was wondering, how would your parents respond if it was branded as though it was the district? And so even with our program, we hold our teachers accountable. We have a complete online evaluation program that we do. And, the teachers, we have best practices, the normal, they respond within 24 hours and they have to give growth feedback. We're really big on that. But even with a particular client who is purchasing services specific to that district, that can all be modified specific to what the client wants. So that's where I'm wondering if you had that level of personalization and it was branded to your district, would that maybe help satisfy that need? Or do you think that would not be okay?
I think when everything goes well and the parent likes it,
Yeah.
but as soon as, I mean, even when you talk about the feedback and interaction, as soon as a teacher and we have an outside partner vendor, as soon as a teacher from that outside partner vendor, if we have them facilitating the class and they give feedback the parent doesn't like, we're kind of in this society where people, kind of sometimes want heads on the table and they want that teacher called in and they want an explanation of what that meant and all those things. Well, as soon as that person isn't our direct employee, now it's contacting you and saying the teacher who you, and I'm not questioning your standard or the standards of our vendors or anything, but
No,
teachers are human too. And they, say something to a student. I mean, it happens, teachers say something to a student and the student misinterprets it or it comes out wrong or whatever. That's when the piece is, as long as people are happy with the service and everything's going well for their kid, it doesn't matter. But as soon as something goes wrong, now they want us to explain what happened in a typical setting. If they, march in our office and, the teachers down the hall, it's pretty easy for a principal to go talk to that teacher, where when it's a teacher out of a partner, now we
so that might be a case actually in some school districts where it's like better for them because they're like, yeah, we fired that guy. Like he's not our staff. We got rid of him. They're gonna do it. Okay, so I need to move on to this last section that we need to review really quickly because we have like a few more minutes here, and I want your opinions on the 9 categories of the definitions of what software is doing inside itself. So those are these ones I have on the screen. Actions, design, controls, that's sort of self-evident. Customizations, things that allow you to tweak it for the individual student or your class. Instruction, lesson giving qualities, like that's the guts. Like, is this stuff any good or what are they doing? Why are they teaching math that way? And then mechanisms, which also is something the code does, like auto opening the gate to the next thing, or, the business model, is it paid? Is it not paid? Are teachers putting kids in there scarily? And they're, what are you doing? You're giving the kids home address, email, what are you doing? So those are the things that are, these are the 9 basic, the basics and not so basics terms are also in here, but these are, so for today, we just want to prep all the other meetings. These are the 9 categories. Do we need more? I've had it suggested we need a category for security. And one for networking terminology, although I don't really know that we have to do that because this is about the software side more or less. So I'm going to go over to the document again on the full definitions of these. Okay, so these are the 9 basic categories. So mechanisms are the digital structures that create a series of steps internally. And then the business model, of course, is, if it's a free or it's paid, who's getting something from you for free, like why are you doing that? And then hostile characteristics. And then the basic and not so basic, those are terms like, let me show you that at the end of the document. Game rewards, long form games. That's business model. Hostile. And then we've got These are the basics and not so basic. Okay. Things like what is caliper analytics? What is big data? What is big learning? What's an account? What do you mean by API? Those are the last ones. So of those 9, what are the thoughts on needing any additional ones? Like we just talked about putting services defined up in the major things. There's a potentiality we need a whole category definitions that are what is the service doing things. Leslie, like you were just talking about, like, is it a certified district teacher versus a non-district? There's probably a terminology there. Is it branded or non-branded, white labeled? Okay, so your thoughts, Lisa.
So 100%, I think it needs a data private. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. We call it data privacy addendums, that they're not selling all of our information, and we will no longer purchase, or even in Colorado, you're not supposed to use any service if you don't have a data privacy agreement, or if your parents have not signed off on the teacher using it. So it is a big deal for me. I'm really into that. I can read almost anything and know right away whether they're going to sell your information or not. Even if most people can't, I can quickly gauge something and go, yeah, they just said we're going to sell all your stuff. And they pretty much said that in the first paragraph. So for me, that's super important, because I think we have to protect our kids' data when they don't know who's getting their data, or by the time they're 5, everything about them is going to be under in the United States. And so for me, I think that's like a must have. And that is something our district takes pretty seriously. During the pandemic, I think we lost a little control, but we've started to gain that back this year. Like, we're purchasing things centrally. No, you can't have that. They don't have a data privacy agreement. You can't, unless you go use your personal credit card, you can't buy that through the district. So I think that's really important for our kids.
Okay, so I got that one down. Leslie, what are your thoughts on these major categories?
You had mentioned kind of that services idea of who's providing it. And I do think that's important, because, when we buy, when we go purchase or become partners with a company, how much is it that we're really in control of, and how much is kind of we purchase this product and they're providing the service and it's there.
Okay. We may have to make up some definitions for that.
Yeah.
Only because this is unique to this market.
Mm-hmm.
Branded, unbranded, certified, not certified, under a consensual privacy agreement. There's a lot here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is good, because, we're trying to take this piece, definitions, into more and more sophistication over time. So these are really good suggestions. We might have to come back to you guys with email and go, is this okay? Right. Wendy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to have input. I'm new to the game, so yeah, we definitely need, as I see it, the services component, and I absolutely agree on the data component. As I look at these 9, and tell me if this is somewhere and I'm just not seeing it, I see design and I see instruction, but I don't see anything about curriculum or assessment. Is that somewhere else?
Yeah, these are just the categories. The individual definitions, I think there's like 50 in the actions alone.
Okay.
So this event is about the big things.
Okay.
Which then shape the underbelly of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I think those are in the other.
Okay.
I think in later events, we need to get deep into the definition of what is a digital assessment, because that too has data collection, data sharing, and privacy things.
Absolutely.
Even in anonymized form that put districts at risk. And Lisa, I want you to comment on that, but I know you know what I'm talking about, because if somebody was able to show how Denver is performing, even though anonymized, it could come back and bite your superintendent, right? Like, you don't want this up on the open internet. What? Our math scores are doing what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other thing I would add is just to say, and you guys all know this, parents have no idea what data they're giving away And I think at the least, if we can protect it in the education setting, that would be amazing, because in classroom teachers don't have any idea. They think free is free, and they do not realize that data is a form of currency. So
Huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so final comments on this, everyone. Like, what are your thoughts? We did good? We covered everything. That's huge for us. I think we're good. Okay, so let me know on that one part that I do want to start, because I do want a page of model policy, model legislation to increase flexibility in space and time delivery for any student anywhere by said local authority district or school, right? And an increasing elasticity to what is the definition of your brand when you may need to suddenly teach everybody, whatever, right? Because that company just moved into your town and everybody's got to learn how to do welding or something, right? So you have to emergency hire somebody that you don't have, and like from the internet. So any thoughts on that? If you guys can get that back to me, that'd be great. Okay. This has been great. I'm your host, LeiLani Cauthen, with my co-host, who's been a lurker in the background, Doug Cauthen. Great to see you, Lisa. Great to see you, Leslie. Thank you so much, Wendy and Brady. I'm going to give everybody a little heads up on what's coming up next. On Friday, we'll have activity 3, where we're going deep into that one category, which is actions of digital resources in learning. It'll be both a learning event for people joining, as well as, does this definition make sense anymore? Do we need more of them? Blah, blah, blah. That's the work that we're doing right now. So thank you again so much. Lisa, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Wendy, Brady, have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much for your help. It's really appreciated. When we put this out nationally, thousands of people use this resource. So huge. Thank you, guys.